Okay, welcome to Positivity Bias, and we are looking at Chapter 3, What Are Humans Made Of? And I want to divert for a second.
Mostly water.
I want to divert even before we get started and share a different story, right? I'm reading a book called 90 Seconds. And the story is about, it's a biography of Ellie Bear. And before I tell you who he is, let me back up a step and say, when Ellie was 5 years old, living in Jerusalem, and he was on his way home from school. The Friday on a summer's day in 1978, Ellie was on his way home from school, walking down Hapikska Street, not far from his father's bookstore. The weather was beautiful and balmy, and Ellie didn't have a care in the world. As he walked, he saw the number 12 bus get blown up by a terrorist. And he was standing there at 5 years old, and there was somebody lying on the ground, looking at him, calling him, "Come help me, help me." And he stared for a minute, and then he ran home. If I stop the story here, we feel sorry for a kid that was traumatized. Fast forward, he's in elementary school. I'd say 10, 11 years old. And he's a part of that substrata of society of kids that spend most of their days in the hallways of school because they've been kicked out of class.
Been there, done that.
And at some point he quit hanging out in the hallways and he started taking a walk outside, and he went down to a few blocks away to the local museum, Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Museum. And over the next few years, he became very familiar with every exhibit, every picture, every audio recording, every story at Yad Vashem. When he was 5, I don't ever want to be in that position again where I can't help someone. He wants to save a life. When he was 11 or so, he felt, I want to save 6 million lives. He became a teenager and school was really no option. And so he went to a volunteer organization and hung out with MADA, Magen David Adom. It's the ambulance company throughout Israel. And they train EMTs who become volunteers. Ellie became a volunteer at MADA. And he felt that through this, he might be able to be trained so that he would never feel like he did when he was 5. And it drove him. Lots of other steps in between, but at some point he's running an illegal radio operating system in his basement of equipment he bought from Radio Shack when he visited the States and snuck into Israel, because you're not allowed to own police scanners privately in Israel. And he's dispatching a bunch of his friends as EMTs because the ambulance system takes too long. You don't have 20 minutes. A life has 3 minutes, maybe. And so they're ending up arriving at the scene way before the ambulances get there. And he's downstairs and he hears the dispatch. It's right outside his house, his apartment. But he didn't hear the accident because he was in the basement. So he ran upstairs, he ran outside. Someone was lying on the ground, but this time he knew what to do. They had a very bad accident, and there was a arterial bleed from at the throat, and clearly life-threatening. But he had no equipment. and he didn't have a long shirt on. He grabbed his yarmulke and he stuffed it into the wound and held the pressure there. And when the ambulances did come, they took him off to the hospital. But Ellie was thinking the damage was too much. Not really much chance that person lived. But in the neighborhood, he was a hero because he had responded so quickly and he knew what to do. 3 days later, he got a call from one of the family members. Dad survived. He's in the hospital and he heard about you and he wants you to come so he can thank you. The guy survived and Ellie went to the hospital, and Ellie was thinking to himself, this was the fulfillment of that dream when I was 5. I don't ever want to be in a position like that again. I saved a life. I actually saved a life. And the guy hugged him close, and while he was hugging him, Ellie realized the guy had tattoo numbers on his arm.
Ooh.
He was a Holocaust survivor. And Ellie remembered his dream at his visits to Yad Vashem, and he said, I'm going to save 6 million lives. I haven't finished the book yet. But I can tell you, he has saved more than just the one life. He has got this down to 90 seconds. And his goal is 90 seconds anywhere in Israel. Between him and United Hatzalah, which he's the CEO, they have saved 6 million lives.
Yeah.
So I share this story as the introduction to our chapter here because, again, if we'd stopped the story short about a traumatized 5-year-old, or a kid living in the hallways of the school, or a teenager who's more comfortable at Yad Vashem than he is at school, those are all parts of the story, but they're painful parts of the story, and they're not the whole story, because the whole story hadn't played itself out yet. It still hasn't. I can tell you that Ellie, as an adult, ended up getting COVID while he was in the United States and nearly lost it. But how did he get home to Israel to his family? Hatzalah jet. Hatzalah jets took him home. Oh, and I should mention along the way, he was always feeling bad because his older brothers, all of his brothers were Talmidei Chachamim. They were scholars and rabbis, and obviously make a dad proud. Well, the day his dad had a heart attack and died, but was brought back, he could feel that he had the pride. He knew that his dad was just as proud of him as he was of any of the brothers. So we have to see the whole story out. We have 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of a big puzzle that's not played out yet. We have to hang on to the end of the story, right? We have to stick around. There's always that story about the 2 beggars in Israel who were looking for food, and one of the guys, it's for Passover. And so they get invited home to a Passover Seder. And one of the guys, he's never been to a Seder. What happens first? Okay, it starts with a glass of wine. It was wonderful. But then there was matzah. And then there was more talking and talking and talking. And then there was maror and talking and talking. And there was a maror and romaine sandwich and then with matzah. He got out, he left. He just like, I'm done with this. Meets his buddy the next day. He said, fool, you left right before the meal starts. So again, we have to hold on for the whole story. We have to dig deeper into the details of the story to find out, what it's all about. And I think this is one of this chapter is a critical piece to this. So I'm assuming you all read this chapter, but I know that some people that are listening on YouTube channel are not necessarily going to have the book and read the book. So I want to share this chapter because to me this is a very critical chapter, and it's a critical chapter because of who it's about. So in 1960 in Vienna, Viktor Frankl, the world famous author and psychologist, was ready to uproot his whole life, his research, his clinical practice, and move to Australia, which even then was the end of the world. And basically, he survived Holocaust, he survived Auschwitz, and even found a meaning in that. But what he couldn't take was the derision of the professionals in his field. In that time, the science of psychology was still trying to get a footing. It was still trying to get a foot in the door to actually say, hey, we are a real science. Because psychology, it's not one of those sciences that, like most things, you can test and repeat the test and get the same results every time. Because the mind is way too complex and every circumstance is completely different. So, they were still trying to get accepted in the field of science as an actual science in psychology. And so they were very careful about what they would say and how they would say it. And this is for those who study the field of psychology, you see that there's a split that comes. Freud was solid for a long time, and then there's a split in that. And Viktor Frankl had been at the point where he was at a low end. He couldn't take it anymore. And that's when Marguerite, I can't pronounce the last name, but a well-known opera singer who was from the Vizhnitzer Hasidim dynasty, she arrived at his doorstep in Vienna. Dr. Frankl came to the door, and there was a sharply dressed woman there he'd never met. She announced herself as the bearer of a personal message from the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn. And upon hearing the startling explanation for her visit and recognizing the Rebbe's name, Dr. Frankl immediately invited her in. And she said, the Rebbe asked me to tell you that you must not give up. You must be strong. Do not be disturbed by those who ridicule you. You will succeed. Your work will achieve a major breakthrough. So in that most critical of time, when he was ready to give up, a message of hope came in from a trusted source that you will do this. This is incredibly important, and you will get through this. And what was critical was, and it's only a few years later that Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, was translated into English and then became very, very popular, and in a sense was the founding father of the whole self-help industry at that point. But the question that was being addressed in this time was, what's at the basis of the human psyche? You have Maslow's theory of hierarchy, but we see that people have functioned below there. They have been creative before. I mean, even Frankl himself, the development of his philosophy on logotherapy, it happened in the concentration camps. It happened in Auschwitz, when he saw people deprived of everything of their humanity turn and take care of others, give what little they had to others. And so that self-fulfillment, it wasn't just about food and drink and shelter. It was a self-actualization, to be able to make a difference in the world, to be able to do something, accomplish something. And that deep, deep level, that was the fundamental rift between the different perspectives in psychology at that time. And what Frankl writes about there is that the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude at any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. That's the bottom line. that the most deep and powerful self-fulfillment is to make your own choices. And then we can get into the question of again, the idea of the soul and the soul's transcendence of the physical body and the physical needs and everything else, the capacity to go on and push further. Those are all parts of this. We're talking with veterans here, so bring the question back to in SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Right, in SEER training, one of the things that is taught about is that a service member who might be in a secluded situation, might be alone behind enemy territory, or might even be captured, God forbid. You need to know what motivates you. You need to know what your higher power is, your source of what moves you, and you have to be able to use that in the toughest times, because it's not about food or drink or shelter. It's about your ability to make your own decisions, to make your own choices, how you're going to be, and what you'll think about, where your mind is. And you need to be able to do that to take you through the darkest times. So there was a story here about someone who came to the Rebbe and was talking about how horrible people can be. And yes, we see that. We see that now, as we've seen it in the past, we see it now. And the Rebbe talks about digging deeper, right? On the surface, things may be nice, but if you dig deeper, it's dirt and grime. And the Rebbe's response was, don't stop there. Keep digging, and you'll find diamonds, emeralds, the real treasures, but you have to dig deeper. And that's the focus here, is that if we'll go deep enough to find the jewel in any given person or any given set situation, then we can have a positively bias about all things. Again, not all things are revealed. Like we talked about that last week, right? Sometimes it's like, well, when it's all ugly and it's all bad, how do you maintain that positivity? And part of that is hanging on to see the end of the story, choosing to stick around to see the end of the story. How can this possibly be good? Well, we will yet see how this could possibly be good. But you have to stick around. You have to dig deeper and stick around long enough to see how what seems to be very bad and difficult now, in truth itself, could be a great thing. So now I ask for you to share a story. I ask for you to share a story about a time when you hung around long enough to see the good side of the story, or you dug deep enough to see the good side of the story. I'll share one of the first ones that I think I've shared this before, but 1968, we were living in Holland. My sister and I were little.
Neighbors.
And I convinced my older sister that, hey, we should go to the beach. So we took access to the money in Mom's purse, and we took the bus to Scheveningen, and we had a great day at the beach. And when I ran out of money, except for the last quarter or dime or whatever it was, we called home. Now, of course, by that time, my parents, who were in a foreign land, in a foreign language, and their kids are missing for hours, They are absolutely beside themselves. And then they get a call, and we're here at Scheveningen, and you this road and this road. Can you pick us up? We ran out of money for the bus fare. So they came immediately, and of course, what's going on in my mom's head? Do I hug him before or after I kill him?
Yep.
But I share this story because a couple of pieces. One is it's a great story. For all the trauma they went through at that time, my parents had a great story to share later. But like playing hide and seek, you don't know, you don't necessarily see the value in the relationship until you desperately are missing it, or that it seems to be threatened. Then it comes out in full value, right? So to have the desperation only brings out the depth of the love. And she didn't kill me. I'm still here. Granted, she has had, in a sense, her own little revenge, in that, my wife and I were blessed with a bunch of kids, and we've had that situation multiple times.
Yeah.
Not in a foreign land with a foreign language. It was Australian, and there was still kind of English, sort of.
Did your mom at least unleash a can of whoop ass for you?
She held me till I couldn't breathe.
Oh.
But stories, what do you have that might, again, the idea being to dig deeper to find the good, or to stick around long enough to see the end of the story?
Well, I hope we live long enough, Judy and I, to see the end of our story where we are struggling with positivity. The positive thing being that our son is still alive. He has just lost enough weight that maybe he can qualify for a kidney transplant. He is now a little bit closer to home, but it is a logistic nightmare. So the positive side of that is he's alive. We are still able to help him. And I don't know whether we'll see the end of that story. I hope we will. A
Amen.
positive outcome.
Amen. So we're holding out. We're
We're holding out.
seeing some of the positive things along the way, and celebrating each minor victory in the journey.
Now, I would also unleash a can of whoop ass on him because he does not communicate. So, for instance, today we expected him to be home.
Wait a minute, should I turn off the recording for this?
No, that's okay. That's okay. One of these days I'll play
He
it
might
for him.
say yes.
Yeah. But anyhow, he is not the greatest communicator. So we had more or less anticipated for him to come pick up the rest of his laundry and have dinner with us, because then we can somewhat control his diet and make sure he doesn't eat crap he shouldn't be eating in his condition. He is fed, by very generous people where he's sleeping at night.
But
About
it's not kosher.
10 minutes from here, certainly not kosher. But we let the kosher go for now. He has to do that with the man eventually. But we're more concerned about the nutritional elements. Is he eating stuff that he shouldn't be to complicate his condition? So that's another one of our source.
Right. And so you maintain the positive attitude to hope and see.
You have to.
The good parts of it. And yes, we have to. Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know, being good without giving a choice, is that really a virtue? I don't think so. It's more like coercion.
Yeah, but you have to make that choice. You have to make the choice.
That's right.
Yeah. Who else has a story to share regarding sticking around to see the good at the end of the story, or to be able to celebrate along the way?
Well, I sort of have one. It's not nearly as deep. I remember when I was in early school, probably first grade, I did something wrong on the playground. I don't remember what it was, but this teacher came in for yelling at me, and I ran away. And for a long while after, when I saw her coming, I would hide. One day I confessed to my mother what was going on, and 2 or 3 days later, my teacher gives me something to bring to another classroom to the teacher there. And of course, it was the teacher I was running away from. And she was very sweet, and we had a wonderful relation thereafter.
Very good. Yeah. No, absolutely. So, the beginning of the stage is making the choice to dig deeper and see possibilities that are there, right? A deeper stage is to be able to draw out a lesson or a benefit from the challenge itself. So in that case, here was one of those first experiences at 6 years old when you experienced someone you were terrified of became someone that you trusted and liked.
Exactly.
And so going on in life, you could see that could happen. That could be a thing. And you had a living example of it in your life of when that was a reality. Excellent. Good story.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll wrap this one up.